Hey gang, hope you're all well. If you're from the US, hope you had a great Independence Day. If you're from the Great White North, hope you had a great Canada Day. For the rest of you, hope you just had ducky days without any holidays. Anyway, enjoy Volume 16 of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. Let's rock. Something at Brunckow Cabin. Submitted by Too Tall Tom. About 15 years ago, some friends and I took a trip off-roading in Arizona and decided to check out Tombstone while we were out there. It's a really cool town with a lot of spooky stories. While we were there, we met a guy who told us about these ruins not too far from Tombstone called Brunckow Cabin. It wasn't too far off the beaten path, but he said we would need our vehicle to get there. Legends say that it's had more than 20 murders happen there, with many of the dead buried right there on the spot. We thought, hey, what the hell, let's check it out. There was an access road that took you to it, but I'm told that it's now gated and there are no trespassing signs all over the place, but you still can't get to it by foot. Anyway, we went out there in the evening and wanted to camp, but the guy in Tombstone told us you need a permit, and we really couldn't have stayed in the ruins anyway. Park service rules and whatnot. When we got there, the sun was just starting to creep towards the horizon, and it was really cool looking. Now, this is the true desert. There's not any tall trees, just lots of brush and stuff surrounding the cabin. It was getting darker as we poked around the few walls still standing, and we must have gotten caught up in things because it became dark very fast, and soon we had to click on our flashlights. We decided to head back to the truck when my friend Jamie stopped and asked, "Do you guys hear that?" We all stopped and stood quietly, listening, and said, "No, what are you talking about?" "Sounded like a growl and some bushes moving," he said. We continued to listen, but there was nothing, so we kept walking to the truck. And that's when we heard footsteps walking on gravel, and it was coming from the other side of the truck. I thought maybe it was a peccary or a deer, because if it was a coyote, we would have heard them crying, and this sounded heavier. We moved closer to the truck and had our lights playing on it when we got the shock of our lives. From the other side of the truck came this thing. It was white and bony and looked sort of human, but its arms were really, really long. One was wrapped around the grill of the truck, and the other was stretched out over the hood. It had a skull-like face that was kind of like an old man's, and it sort of grinned at us, but I don't think that it meant that anything was funny. It sat there looking at us, and then started to slide around the front of the truck, and that's when I started backing up. My friend Joe yelled out, "Run!" And we all backed up and turned and ran into the ruins. We jumped over the little wall and hid like little kids. I peeked my head over the wall and saw that it was coming towards us, standing on two long legs. I mean, this thing had to have been about 7 feet tall. It knew where we were and walked right up to the wall, but then stopped. It was as if it couldn't pass over the wall. We all kind of scrambled back away from it, and it started to follow the wall around the cabin outline. And I freaked out knowing that the far wall wasn't there. I mean, there wasn't a wall at all. It could just walk right into the ruins. And I said as much in a terrified voice. And Jamie told me to shut the fuck up and calm down. If the thing, whatever it was, tried to get us that way, we could hightail it back to the truck, as it would be a clear shot to it. We saw the creature walk by a gap in the wall, looking through it at us, and it got to the far end of the cabin where there was no wall. It just stood there like it couldn't get in, even though there was nothing stopping it. It just sort of swayed there in the light of our flashlights. I don't know how long that went on for, but suddenly Jamie said, "Back to the truck, fast, now, just go, 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 now!" We all booked it over the wall and back to the truck. Once we got inside and started it up and kicked the lights on, and there it was shambling towards us. I gunned it in reverse, not thinking about what was behind us, which was pretty stupid because the terrain was very rough out there. I got the truck turned around, and Joe and Jamie were yelling to just go, go, get the hell out of there. I looked in the rearview mirror, and that thing was still coming after us. Jamie yelled again, and I looked out the windshield to see 3 more of the things on the road in front of us. When I got close to them, they shuffled out of the way of the truck, and we bounced the 200 or 300 yards back to the main road. We hit the blacktop, and I tore ass down the road and away from that fucking cabin. I hauled down the road to Sierra Vista, and we got a hotel room and crashed with a 12-pack of beer and some burritos. We kept talking about what the hell those things were and why they were there. Why couldn't that thing get into the cabin ruins to chase us? Joe thought they were demon ghosts or something that were protecting the people buried there and that they were trying to scare us out of the area. Over the years, I've had a lot of people say they might have been skinwalkers, but I've heard skinwalkers were really only seen by the Navajo people, and their tribe and territory is nowhere near Tombstone or Sierra Vista. Has anyone seen anything like this in Arizona or New Mexico? I'd love to hear ideas. Strangers in my home. I'm a strong believer in spirits and having visions, and I've been this way since I was 6 years old. Now I'm grown with my own little ones, and I pray they don't have my gift. We moved into a new apartment, and the first night felt good and bad mixed together. I laid down that night and began to hear a little girl laughing very evilly somewhere in the apartment. I jumped up, thinking my daughter was playing a trick on me, to find out she was dead to the world asleep in her bed. So I completely dismissed it and went to sleep. Months later, I found out I was pregnant with my son. Things began to get weirder and scarier by the day. My daughter began to not want to sleep in her own room or bed, or any bed by herself. We began to hear strange voices and laughing in the dark of night, and it seemed to intensify over time. So one night, I thought we were going to have a night with no voices, glimpses of someone walking by, or our things disappearing. But I was wrong. My son's father came to spend the weekend because my daughter told him she was scared, and he thought he could help her out. That night, we were all having a great time until we got into bed. About an hour later, my daughter was in tears, begging to sleep in the bedroom with us. I had already put another bed in my room for her when she gets scared or hears things. So much for my kids not having the gift. We finally settled down, and about 20 minutes later, I heard my boyfriend calling me because something was happening to him. I was having a nightmare about him, holding a small child, and something attacking him, but thought it was all just part of the dream. But then I woke up and realized he really was calling me. I followed his voice, and he was in the bathroom with what looked like claw marks on him. Scared half to death, I asked him what happened, and just like in my dream, he said he had heard someone outside of the window talking about a new baby boy, and when he looked to see if anything was out there, something clawed at him. A few moments later, my daughter came around the corner with a scared look on her face, but with a passive, blunt tone in her voice that didn't sound like her. She said, "You know they want your baby, right?" Then she just walked away as if nothing could be done about it. I couldn't tell him that she was just playing, or what happened to him wasn't real, because what she'd said had been told to me twice already. Once in a dream, and once by something else in the house while I was standing in the kitchen alone. July came so fast, and my son was born. I was excited and worried as I got ready to have him. I had him early on a Sunday morning, and I couldn't wait to leave the hospital so my family could see him. But I was also scared that something wanted my baby back in that apartment. 2 months went by, and nothing happened. No actions, no words. It was complete peace. Until about 3 weeks ago. It started with pictures of my son that I had placed around the house. Something had clawed his face out of all of them. I thought it was my daughter at first, but I ruled that out, as a lot of these things happened when she was with me and we weren't even home. The worst thing happened just the other day. I was playing with him in my lap, and he was laughing. All of a sudden he started crying. So I tried to pull him towards me to comfort him, but I could feel something else trying to pull him away. I wasn't the only one to witness this. So did my daughter, and my grandmother was there too. I was fighting with something to keep my son in my arms. I had begun to cry, and this was the last straw for me. My son kept looking at whatever it was that we couldn't see, and he kept screaming. So I told whatever it was that it couldn't have him. And all of a sudden, I started to hear that little evil girl's laughter again, and then nothing at all. I don't think this is over, but I do think this entity is stuck in this apartment. But we are done with this place. We're moving at the end of the month. He Found Me, submitted by Chrisanne. This happened to me 2 years ago. My husband and I had just gotten married, and we were both working 2 jobs to save money to buy a house. I was a secretary at a construction firm and also worked at Victoria's Secret. I'd worked there in high school and through college, too. Yeah, I'm still a secretary, but no, I don't work at the mall anymore, for obvious reasons. My hubby Rob is an electrician, and at this time he was also doing freelance work for extra cash. There was this guy who used to come into the store all the time, just kind of walked around for a long time and would end up buying something after like an hour. He looked like a normal guy, nothing creepy like you would always hear in those stories. He was tall and thin and looked kind of nerdy. He wasn't causing any problems, but he always refused help in choosing something and would sort of space out while looking at things. One thing he always did that I thought was odd was he would sort of rub his hands on all the panties on display, and one day I finally asked him what he was looking for and if he needed any suggestions for his wife or girlfriend. I'll never forget. He looked up at me and smiled and just said his name was Barry. I told him my name and asked him again if he needed help. He said no, but thank you. He was fine. I walked away and started helping another customer and didn't think about him for a while. But I later saw him talking to my manager. I overheard her say, "If you're interested in buying that, I can help you, but please don't do that in the store. If you do it again, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." I saw him nod and then move to another area of the store, and my manager just stared at him. I went back to my customer and helped her pick out some things, and then had to fold some clothes, so Barry was out of my mind again. A while later, my manager told me to take my break. Now, normally I brought a salad or something for lunch, but this day I didn't and went to the mall food court to grab something. While I was standing waiting for some stir-fried chicken, I felt like someone was staring at me. I looked up and behind me, and Barry was standing against the table watching me. I looked away and got my food and started back for the store to eat in our back room. I had no idea that he followed me back until my manager poked her head into the back room and said, "That Barry guy is kind of creepy. He just asked for you to check him out, but I told him that you were on break, so I did it." Her name is Sue, then told me what he was doing earlier when she talked to him. He had been staring at me, pretending to look at some slips, but at the same time was rubbing his crotch. Now, I'm not what I consider hot or anything, and there were plenty of other girls younger and much prettier than me that worked there. Why he was looking at me, I don't know. I told her that he had followed me to the food court, and she said she was going to have a mall security guard escort him out of the store. She didn't have to. After he bought what he'd bought, he left on his own. At the end of the night, I was doing the normal retail thing of cleaning up and straightening out clothes and stuff. Sue told me she would walk me to my car. She had a weird feeling about Barry. Most of the cars were gone from the parking lot, and we had a rule about parking away from the mall entrances for the convenience of others. Sue's car was a few spots down from mine, but there was a car right next to my Jeep, so close that there was no way I would be able to get into the driver's door. Sue said to stop, and she got a mall guard to walk us out to the vehicles. She got into hers, and I crawled over the passenger seat to get behind the wheel of my Jeep. There was no one else around the car next to me, so the guard told us we should just get going, and said it was okay if I went over the curb in the little patch of grass that was between the lot and the access road out to the street. I did, and waited for Sue to catch up. We waved at each other, and then headed home. It wasn't until about 6 or so blocks away that I noticed a car that looked just like the one in the lot that was next to me. I had to drop something off at the post office on my way back to Rob's in my apartment, and whoever was behind me followed me down a couple of streets, and I knew something was up. When I pulled into the post office parking lot to throw my package into a mailbox, the car kept going, so I guess I was sort of relieved. But when I pulled out and started for home, about 3 streets down, the car appeared again and kept following me. Now I was getting scared and wondered if it was this Barry guy from the store. I finally called my hubby, and I told him I thought I was being followed. He obviously wasn't sure, but told me to err on the side of caution and asked where exactly I was. I told him, and he said to go to a well-lit convenience store that wasn't that far away, and he would meet me there. He was doing a side job that he could leave, so he said to go in the store and not to stay in the car and wait for him. I got there a few minutes later, and sure enough, the car pulled in behind me, but when I parked right in front of the doors, the driver parked over by some vacuums and the air machine on the side of the building. I ran inside and waited for Rob, who showed up about 10 minutes later. I had told the clerk that I thought I was being followed, and he actually went outside and said that he saw a tall, thin guy vacuuming out his car. Rob told me to get back in my Jeep, and he would prevent the car from following me by getting right behind me and not letting him go around. He also told me to take a longer route home and not go straight there, just kind of go in a roundabout way. There was a light at an intersection, so the plan was to let me go through the light while Rob acted like there was a problem with his truck, and then wait for the light to change so I could get some distance from the guy if he was actually following me. Sure enough, when I pulled out and Rob followed, the car immediately pulled out too. When we got to the intersection and the light turned green, I shot across the road and Rob didn't move. The car honked its horn at him, but he was stuck. There was oncoming traffic before the light went back to red. Rob said he looked in the rearview mirror and saw the guy in the car pounding his wheel, giving him the finger before he made a right turn, which was the fastest way back to our apartment. When he looked back, Rob said he saw the car going straight after my car, but thankfully he never caught up with me. When I got home, Rob was already there talking to my mother, who was watching our little girl. We told her what had happened, and she told us that we were smart for working together. It was Barry in the car, but we wouldn't find that out for another couple of weeks. Things were certainly not over yet. I decided to stop working at Victoria's Secret, and while Sue was sad to see me go, she understood. Later she would tell me that Barry would stop in and ask for me at least once a week. Then, one day I was at my full-time job, and a guy came in for an estimate on a roofing job. Guess who? Yeah, Barry. I almost peed my pants. I told him I would get someone to help him, and got the boss's son who happened to be in the office. I went into the break room freaking out and told my friend Ann, who was the accounting person, all about Barry. She looked at me wide-eyed and told me to call Rob. I did, and he got permission from his boss to come and get me. My boss also told me it was a good idea to go home early and leave my car at work. I was scared. How did this guy know I worked at the construction firm? I was really freaking out, and Rob tried to console me, but told me I'd be safe when I got home. My mom was there with our baby, and she would be able to calm me down, I thought. Rob got me inside our apartment, and we told my mom what was going on. She said she'd stay the afternoon with me, and Rob had to get back to work. We tried to enjoy the time by watching Netflix and playing with Melissa, when I heard a noise come from our kitchen. It sounded like the back door opening. My mom and I looked at each other and said she would go look. Our apartment was on the ground floor, and the back door went out onto a little patio. For some reason, I grabbed Melissa and heard my mom yell as she came running back into the room. "Run! Run!" she screamed, and I screamed and ran for our bedroom, with Mom right behind me. We had a huge walk-in closet with a heavy door and locks on the inside, as Rob wanted us to have sort of a panic room in case something ever crazy happened. Yeah, something like this. We all piled in, and I gave Melissa to my mom, and I snapped the door shut and locked the deadbolts in place. Everything was quiet, except for our breathing, and even Melissa seemed half asleep. Barry was in our kitchen. Mom had forgotten to lock the door after taking some garbage out that morning. We got our cell phones out, and she called 911, and I called Rob. We were both whispering, hoping that this fucking guy thought we ran out the front door. The police dispatcher said they were sending someone right away, and Rob was coming back too. We could hear Barry going through the rooms and finally into our bedroom. He was breathing heavily and slamming things around. It sounded like he was looking for us, but also going through our drawers and stuff. Suddenly, the closet door handle started jiggling, and he started pounding on the door, yelling that he knew I was in there, and I was going to go with him whether I liked it or not. Melissa started crying at this point as he kept hitting the door over and over and yelling for me to come out. Then we heard footsteps in the hallway and loud voices yelling at him to get on the ground and drop the knife. The police had arrived. There was a struggle and a lot of heavy breathing, and finally they took him out of the room. After what seemed something like 10 minutes but was really just a couple, there was a knock at the door and a policeman asked if we were in the closet. My mom said yes and went to unlock the door. 2 officers were standing there and helped us out, all 3 of us crying. We went into the living room as more police arrived, and Rob finally came in and grabbed us and hugged us. Barry had gotten in and had a big hunting knife and a duffel bag that the cops searched and found pairs of my underwear, a crowbar and a hammer, and what was scariest of all, handcuffs, duct tape, and big black garbage bags like the ones you put in garbage cans at a football stadium. It wasn't until later that we found out he was going to tie me up, wrap me in the bags, and drive me to a cabin to rape me. How did he find me? For starters, he looked at my profile on LinkedIn and saw where I worked. Then he searched one of those free background searches online and saw almost all of my information, address, relatives, even our home phone number that we paid to have unlisted, posted right there in black and white on the screen. I'm still afraid to be home alone sometimes, and I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, even though Barry is in jail. I went all over the internet looking for my family's information to see if it's listed anywhere, and I tell the sites to take it down if they have it. I suggest anyone hearing this do the same. It's crazy to know how much personal information is available to anyone out there and how easy it is to get it. I used to have the police blotter report of this incident and wanted to share it with you, but I couldn't find it, and the paper that it appeared in is no longer in business. We've moved since all this happened, so, Barry, if you ever get out, you won't be finding me so easy. And let's never meet again. A Kleptomaniac Ghost. When I was 14 years old, I was living in the heart of the San Fernando Valley with my parents and my younger brother, who was 13 years old. We lived in a typical 3-bedroom tract home in suburbia. My parents decided to put the house up for sale and move to a bigger house, and that's when things changed. There was a spare room attached to the garage that used to be painted in all these psychedelic colors and bizarre symbols, but we covered all of it up with white paint. Soon after the house was listed on the market, we had some rain, and my father noticed the ceiling in the shed was sagging from water damage, exposing the wood beams underneath, so he had to tear it down. Strangely enough, lodged among the beams, we discovered a pair of binoculars, some commemorative coins from an Apollo space mission, and a cheap watch. Nothing of particular value, except perhaps sentimental. But all of us felt a collective chill go down our spines as we wondered who these items belonged to, and how they managed to get above the ceiling, and why anyone thought they were worth hiding in the first place. Soon after, my mom received her monthly bank statement in the mail, and noticed a couple of checks that were not written by her, but someone had signed her name. Puzzled, she picked us up from school and asked about it on the way home, but neither of us would ever forge a check. She went to retrieve the check to show us, but both of them were missing from the stack. Pretty soon, all of our personal items began to disappear and reappear in the oddest places. At first we thought someone was playing a practical joke, or that one of us was responsible, so the accusations began to fly. But some of the other events that took place were so mind-boggling, we became sure that no person could be responsible. Once, my mom and I came home after grocery shopping, and as we were unpacking the groceries, we discovered that a whole bunch of non-food items had disappeared, even though we specifically saw the checker bag them. By this time we were used to this, and figured that these things would reappear in the middle of the night, or in the oven, or under the bed. One day my parents went out to run errands for a couple of hours, and I settled myself to a long gab with my friend on the phone. As I chatted, I idly opened and closed one of my desk drawers. It was completely empty, but when I closed it and opened it a second time, I saw a bottle of shampoo lying inside. The same bottle of shampoo that was missing from our groceries. I told my girlfriend what was going on and closed the drawer after removing the shampoo. Embracing myself, I opened it again, and this time there was a tube of toothpaste. Astounded, I tore out the bottom 2 drawers and peered below the drawer, looking for any explanation of this phenomenon. Even stranger, my top drawer is a lockable drawer, so once it's closed, it's completely inaccessible from behind the desk or below. Wanting a witness to verify that I wasn't hallucinating, I called my brother in, and without explaining anything, I showed him the empty drawer and closed it. I opened it, and inside rested a 6-pack of Ivory soap. He freaked out and ran screaming from the room. At this point, I was too excited to be frightened, so I continued to open and close the drawer, and sure enough, each time a new item appeared, sometimes 2. I even requested some specific items, like my nail polish or hair gel, to materialize, and they did. After every single missing item was retrieved, I stared at them all lining up on my desk in excited wonder, and then the weirdness of what just happened hit me. I began to wonder if this thing, a ghost or whatever it is, can dematerialize and teleport these items around the house. There's no telling what else or who else it could do something to. Gathering up my hard-won toiletries, I joined my terrified brother on the front doorstep and waited for my parents to come home. And my girlfriend came running down the street to keep me company as well. This is just one of the many bizarre yet true events that my family and I came to live with for the next 5 years. Certain things like cash were always missing, no matter how closely you kept it against your body or how carefully you hid it. Important documents, term papers, school books, all kinds of things always managed to disappear when we needed them the most. This ghost was clearly prescient and knew what was the most important to you and the most inconvenient to steal. No matter how many times we moved, this presence made our lives miserable, but with each passing year as my brother and I got older, the activity slowed down. By the time I left for college, there were only 2 incidents I can recall, and now that I'm married and 27 years old, nobody in my family has been affected. It Smiled at Me by Crimson Hope. I am 27 years old, and I live in Ontario, Canada. When I was 10, I lived in a semi-detached house with my father, mother, little sister, and baby brother. When we moved into that house, everything was going great. I was as happy as I could have been, finally, in a house with a backyard to play in. No more apartments. It really was exciting. I shared a room with my sister, and we had bunk beds. She had the top bunk, and I had the bottom. We had our bed set up so that our headboards were along one part of the corner, and the right side of our bed was against the other. Our bedroom door was on the same wall as our headboards. It was a night like any other night. We brushed our teeth, put on our PJs, gave our parents a goodnight kiss, and then headed off to bed. We kept our bedroom door open for some lighting that came in from a nightlight that was plugged in the hallway. I was fast asleep until I had this strange feeling that something was in the room watching me. I opened my eyes and turned my head to look at my left, and to my horror there was something there, right up against the side of my bed. It was all black from what I could see, and it had long, pointed ears that stuck up off the top of its head, large, glowing red eyes, and claw-like hands were resting on the edge. I'm not sure how tall the creature was, because all I could see was it from the chest up. As soon as it noticed that I was looking at it, it smiled at me, a massive smile with sharp-pointed teeth. It dug its claw-like hands into the bedding and just kept smiling. My heart started to race and my breathing intensified. I couldn't move, I couldn't run, and I couldn't scream. The creature knew it had me trapped, and it smiled even wider. I was so scared that tears started to blur my vision, and I felt like I had to do something. I had to move. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, I was able to pull the covers over my head and turn away from it. I kept whispering ever so softly, "Go away, go away." And just like that, I was out cold once again. When I woke up the following morning, my head was throbbing, and it felt wet at the back. I placed my hand on the area, and a wave of burning pain came rushing in. I looked at my hand, and it was covered in blood. I ran to the kitchen, crying to my father as he was preparing us breakfast. He noticed the blood on my hands and asked if I had fallen out of bed. I said no, and he immediately took a look at the back of my head and was in shock at the amount of blood. He picked me up and ran into the bathroom and washed off as much as he could. My father told me there were tiny gashes forming into what looked like teeth marks. He thought it'd be a good idea to take me to the hospital straight away and have a doctor take a look at it. The doctor had no idea as to what it was or what could have caused it, but it indeed looked like a bite, he agreed. He explained to my father that stitches weren't needed, thankfully, but whatever it was very badly infected. I was given some sort of ointment for it and had to put it on the wound twice a day, every day. After a couple of weeks or so, the pieces of my scalp started coming off and produced such an awful smell that went on for almost 6 years. My family and I moved out of that house 4 years after that night, and not once did I see that creature again. Well, until the first night in our new home, that is. I had my own room now. My bed was in a corner again, but the left side was against the wall. The window was across the room to my right, and my bedroom door was near the foot of my bed. I was asleep, and once again I had that feeling something was watching me. I opened my eyes and sat up right away and saw the creature again. This time it was outside of the house, sitting on a tree branch, looking right at me through the window. It just sat there for a few minutes, and I was able to get a better look at its form. It appeared to be about 3 feet in height and almost humanoid. Its left arm was resting on the branch slightly above it, with the right one at its side. The legs were swinging back and forth, and then it jumped out of the tree in a flash. I got up and ran over to the window as quickly as possible and closed the curtains, then ran back to my bed and hid under the blankets again. It bothers me not knowing what it was, and not knowing just what it did to the back of my head. My Bigfoot Encounter. I have held off telling this story for years for fear of persecution and accusations of lunacy. I mean, after all, who doesn't like to poke fun at the freaks who tell of UFO and Bigfoot incidents, right? I can confidently say that this sighting is absolutely true. I'm a licensed English teacher, currently working at a large public high school in Oregon, and I have nothing to gain by telling this story. I am educated, of sound mind, and am not wasting my efforts on a hoax of any sort. At the time of my sighting, I was alone in a 2-bedroom residence located approximately a quarter-mile north of U.S. Highway 199 on a gradual wooded slope. On this 3-acre property, there are 2 horse pastures, one below the house and one above the house. Both pastures are surrounded by active hot wire fences and contain 2 horses, which may move freely between both lower and upper pastures. I was completing a research paper for a college class at the kitchen table. I had the light on, and my friend's dog, a small brown heeler, was on a 35-foot wire tether tied to the front porch outside the small house. I was engrossed in my schoolwork when I heard the dog outside going ballistic. I was alarmed by this, so I listened carefully, and will never forget what I heard next. All the dogs and horses from the other residences, which were quite far away, over several rises and ridges, they were all shrieking non-stop. Wanting to be cautious, I went to my gun safe and removed a large-caliber pistol and grabbed a powerful flashlight and then headed towards the front door. I turned off all the lights in the house and opened the front door, playing the flashlight around outside before exiting. What I saw unnerved me. The small heeler was focused on the lower horse pasture and steadily giving off a quiet growl. The 2 horses had moved to the upper pasture and were rustling about and neighing unusually. I squatted down beside the dog and pointed my flashlight in the direction of his muzzle. And what I saw at this time nearly stopped my heart. There was a large figure crouched down outside the outer hot wire in the tall grass beside a telephone pole. My light was reflected back at me by 2 small circular markers on the pole, and further dispersed by the light fog, making initial identification very difficult. At first I thought, bear. To my complete shock, the dog suddenly screamed and leapt straight up into the air with its hair bristled. Upon landing, it bolted under a pickup truck and whined like a puppy. This all happened in just a couple of seconds. I saw a creature rise up on 2 legs and began to move along the hot wire. I rose to a full standing position and aimed my pistol right on it. In my mind, I was thinking, bear? No. Horse? Wait, is that a man? No. God, what the F is that thing? I consciously tracked the creature with my pistol sights and flashlight beam for at least 2 seconds. I was a military police officer in the Army for over 5 years and trained in firearms tactics. It all came back at this moment, let me tell you. Suddenly, I saw this huge thing take off in a full bipedal run. The thud rhythm and distinct movement of its 2 legs and feet were unmistakable. I was more frightened than I can ever remember being, but I bolted for the house and immediately armed myself with a larger rifle and called my friend's father to come from Grants Pass to search for this thing. A little later, he arrived, and we drove down to the road outside the hot wire where I estimated the creature to have been. Since the road was gravel, all we found was disturbed grass, as if something large had moved through it. No footprints were located. For the remainder of the night and into the next morning, all the animals in the small community near Wilderville were restless and noisy, the little heeler being the worst off, for he did not calm down for an entire day. I hope someday someone can prove the existence of what I saw, and not just have to take my word for it. but I assure you, that happened. Bananas, submitted by Tammy. This story happened to me when I was a kid growing up in the UK. I now live in Melbourne, and the knowledge I have now would have served me and my mum well when this happened. We lived in a flat not too far from a greengrocer's, where we went quite a little bit every week to get fresh vegetables in the lot. We did shop elsewhere, but I could take our pushcart down there after school, and it was easy. One of my favorite things was bananas, and at least once a week I got a big bunch bagged up with all the other things and would put them in cereal, on toast with peanut butter, and just, hey, plain. I loved and still love bananas. Man, I'm thinking about a bowl of bananas and cream right now. Anyway, one day Mum sent me off for shopping, and I got her list and a bag of bananas and brought them home. I put everything away and took the bananas out of the bag and set them on the counter and went to do some homework for my O-level classes. After a bit, I went into the kitchen to make tea and have a banana, and stopped and screamed in terror. There was a giant spider sitting on top of the bananas. I mean, I'm not making this up. This thing was as big as a teacup saucer. My mom and little sister came in running in and wondering what had gone all to pot, and I just pointed. Even Mom yelled as the spider moved onto the counter quite quickly, and then stopped. She turned and ran to get the phone and called her brother, who kept animals like lizards and snakes and spiders. We sat watching the thing as it darted towards our kitchen window, and we were amazed at how fast it was, scared to death that it would attack us. Mum came back in and described the spider to my uncle, and her face went white. She said okay, hung up, and then told us that he was coming over, but not to get near it. It was likely dangerous. He called it a wandering spider or something, and that they could kill you with just a bite. We waited for another 15 minutes, but it would be at least an hour before he got there, and I thought, what in the bloody hell is he going to do if this thing is such a terror? He didn't get a chance. Suddenly, the thing moved quickly around the sink and out onto an island table that separated our kitchen from the living room. It raised up a couple of legs and just stood there, and I thought it was staring at us, waiting for the kill. God, it was so stupid. Everyone had been screaming and jumping back, but in the tussle, I had grabbed a cast iron skillet, and before anybody could react, including this demon spider, I smashed down on it, flattening it into a mess of hair, fang, and spider goo. Mum screamed and my sister ran into the living room. I gingerly picked up the pan, and it was certainly dead. I didn't want to clean it up, and Mum said to wait for my uncle. He finally arrived and took a peek at it. He sighed a sigh of relief and let us know that it was not a wandering spider, but a huntsman spider. A very large spider that is very fast, but not harmful to humans at all. He said the reason they move so quickly is because that's its main defense. So, I squashed a harmless but very creepy spider. Mind you, we should have shooted out the window if we could have, says my uncle. Yeah, you first, Buster. Now that I live in Australia, I see them all the time. They're kind of a pest, especially when they hide in your car visors and decide to pop out while you're driving. Well, that's my story. I'm a true hero in the war on creepy crawlies that come with your bananas. Not Alone in the Sugar Shack by DiddyBop45. When I was 12 years old, my father took me, my brother, and 2 of our friends camping on a piece of land deep in the woods of West Virginia one late September. This land is now state-owned, but was part of our family for years when my dad was a kid. His older brothers were involved in the moonshine business and also ran a sugar shack as a legit side business. I think the idea was that the maple sugar business would throw off the scent from the authorities, thinking that the family would never do anything like running bootleg liquor across the county. The abandoned shack was still there, in halfway decent shape, so my dad thought it'd be a good place to set up camp, and then explore the woods and fish in a nearby creek, and work on our scout stuff too. This was around 1986 when the trip took place. My brother Tom and his friend Jason were both 14 at the time, and me and my friend Scott were 12. Dad invited Mom, but she said she didn't want to interrupt guy time, plus she said the smell would probably kill her. We loaded up the pickup with all of our gear and food and set off for a weekend in the woods. It was highway for a while, but then dirt roads, and finally a bumpy fire road that we would park on, and then hike down a trail that was once a road but grew over quickly after the shack was abandoned in the 60s. During the ride, Tom asked my dad why the family quit that business, and the reason was simple. No one in the family wanted to do it anymore, and the state was interested in buying the land for logging and stuff. I then asked why they quit the moonshine business, and he was quiet for a minute. I don't like to talk about this, but you guys are old enough to know the truth, he said. Your Uncle Tom and 2 of his friends were in an accident that killed all 3 of them. When we pressed him on what happened, he said that they were using propane as a source of heat, and something happened, and there was a huge explosion that took their lives. I sat silent. I heard a completely different story from my other uncle, that the cause of the accident had nothing to do with propane, and something to do with spirits in the forest. But I kept my mouth shut. Soon we saw the old trail to the shack and pulled over. We all shouldered backpacks, but also another pack on our front that held things like the cast-iron cookware, knives, and stuff like that. I know it's not super important to this story, but that's the kind of man my dad was and is. He took camping and scouting very seriously, and thought everyone should be hauling something that everyone else would be using on a trip. It was part of being a team. Dragging a cooler on wheels behind him filled with food and water, Dad led the way down the path towards camp. It wasn't a very long hike, and soon we were standing in front of the shack that was still pretty solid. There were no holes in the roof, and all of the glass was still in the windows. Pretty amazing. Dad went in first to check things out, and we unloaded our gear and waited for him to come back. She's looking good, and the wood stove is in great shape, he said, coming back outside. We all pitched in and brought everything in. It was dark as there were only 4 to 5 windows around the building, but there was still enough light to see the old tables and things used in making maple syrup. Dad called on us to help get things set up as far as sleeping, eating, and cooking areas, and after using an old broom to sweep up, we were looking good and wanted to get to some fishing and fun stuff. There was a creek just down the slope that ran uphill parallel to the shack, and that was its primary sense of water long ago, but the pipes that led it were rusted and broken, so we have to haul our own water after we ran out of what was in the cooler. The old still was located somewhere out there, too. Tom bet the rest of us $1 each that he could find it. We got our poles, and Dad led the way down the slope to where the stream crashed over a small waterfall and spilled into a big pool of water. Before we got there, Tom darted off to the side and yelled to us. We all followed and saw him standing in a shallow depression, and he claimed that this was the spot where the moonshine still was. He looked at my dad, and my dad nodded. There really wasn't much to look at, but you could see some old copper tanks and tubing and other stuff that was used in the operation. Tom demanded his money, but we told him to kiss off and got to fishing. While we sat there fishing, Jason and Tom got bored and walked around the pond to look for salamanders or whatever, and I looked at my dad. "Didn't Uncle Tom see ghosts out here, Dad?" I asked. He shook his head and then said, "Your Uncle Tom said a lot of things." "Yeah, but Uncle Mike told me that he and his partner said that something was always messing things up at the still, and at night they would hear screaming and crying." He didn't say anything back about that, and told me not to worry about it, just keep fishing. We caught a bunch of brookies we were going to fry up that night, and we did just that. Everyone helped in, and soon we were on the porch of the shack eating and talking as nightfall came. Soon we were all sitting around the wood stove with the door open, talking about movies and girls and stupid young kid stuff, when we heard footsteps creaking out on the porch. At least I heard it, and asked the others if they did. Dad told me to cut it out and gave me a look that said, "Shut your pie hole." We kept talking and joking when the footsteps came again. This time everyone noticed. It was silent, and then they took off across the entire length of the porch, stamping wildly. We didn't see anything run in front of the windows, but Dad jumped up and ran to the door and threw it open. There was nothing there. Suddenly there was a loud knocking on the front door, and we all turned around to look at that, but just as the pounding was getting louder, footsteps sounded from the roof, and dust and dirt started to fall from the rafters. Scott screamed, and I wanted to, too. Dad slammed the porch door shut, and we heard the footsteps race across the porch again with the pounding and the footsteps on the roof all at once. Then everything stopped. The only sound we could hear was our hearts thumping, and everyone was breathing heavy. What the heck was going on here? This was the days before cell phones were on everyone's hip, and I'm sure we wouldn't get any service out there anyways. Dad had a CB in his truck, but that meant either leaving us alone or going out there with God knows what was running around. My brother looked at his watch and said it was 11. Dad said nothing, and Scott was about to piss his pants. I gotta be honest, I wasn't far behind. I mean, we were just little kids, really. "Okay, everybody around the fire now," ordered Dad. "Who wants some hot chocolate?" I totally remember him trying to keep the order with a bunch of scared kids. "What was that, Mr. S?" asked Jason. "Probably just some local folk trying to scare us. And tell you what, they got us good, and they know it. They're probably halfway home laughing their asses off about it right now." He got out a pot and filled it with water from our water bag, and put it on the stove, and then threw in some more logs. We all calmed down, had some cocoa, and talk turned to football and the Mountaineers and Hokies. Things started to lighten up a bit, and after a while Scott started to fall asleep, and Dad said we all should get some shut-eye if we wanted to get up early and go for a hike down the creek to another waterfall and some better fishing. Sleepily, we crawled into our sleeping bags, but not until we moved them closer around the stove. It was chilly, but I think we were all still kind of scared. After throwing more wood in the stove, Dad closed the door most of the way and settled down to have a smoke and just watch over us. I don't know what time it was when Tom woke up, but he woke up screaming and yelling, "There it is! There it is! What the fuck is that?" We are not a cursing family, and to hear your brother wake up in the middle of the night screaming was enough to rattle us all. There was confusion, I recall, as Tom kept yelling and pointing at the window on the porch side of the shack. I could sort of make out his shape, and Dad jumped up again and ran for the door. When he got there and ripped the door open, he jumped out onto the porch. But nothing was there. Tom was hyperventilating and just kept saying it was there, it was there. Everyone pressed him for what he saw. The best he could say was that it looked like the swamp hag from the movie Legend. Normally we would have rolled our eyes, but I saw a shape, and the noises were all real. No one was going back to sleep. This was scary, and I know my dad was nervous, even if he didn't believe something paranormal was going on. He was sure there was something out there. I checked my watch, and it was just after 2. About 3, whatever it was, came back. We could hear the wailing in the distance towards the still, but then there was more coming from the path. It got louder and louder, and there was banging on the walls and roof like before, and the footsteps on the porch racing back and forth, and Dad once again went to the window, and I don't know how he had the balls to do it, but I guess he just wanted to protect us. He looked out as the noises kept going and then backed away from the window, slowly, with his mouth open. He got back to us and just stood there wide-eyed and didn't answer when my brother asked what he saw. Then the noises stopped. Instantly. They didn't fade out, just boom, done. Nothing happened the rest of the night, and we all did fall asleep around 4. When we got up, Tom, Jason, and I went outside and saw marks all over the porch. Not footprints or animal tracks, just hundreds of these indentations all over. Dad looked at them and us and said we should just have breakfast. We kept talking about it over and over, and Dad finally told us to knock it off. It was just animals. There was a debate on staying. We ended up fishing, but leaving in the afternoon. I don't think anyone wanted to stay another night, including my dad. We have no idea what that was all about or who was out there in the woods, but we know it was real. Me and Tom are still friends with Scott and Jason, and we talk about it every once in a while, even though Scott's version is a little more dramatic than what really happened. I guess that's his privilege. Dad never spoke about it to us kids again. Last year, my family was visiting my mom and dad in West Virginia, where they still live. I now live in Charlotte, North Carolina. When everyone was in the house, we were out grilling in the backyard. After talking about sports and politics and what the kids were doing, there was a lull in the conversation. I asked him what he saw out at the sugar shack when we were kids. He stared at me for a long time and took a pull on his beer. I'm paraphrasing what he said, but he spoke. I can't tell you exactly what it was, but it was the most awful thing God could have put on this earth. And maybe God didn't put it here at all. Maybe something else did. And that's all he would say. And I finally asked him if he thought what he saw was what killed his brother Tom and his buddies. He looked off across the yard and slowly nodded. My brother and I have talked about going back out to the sugar shack to see if it's still standing, and we always say that maybe we will even stay overnight again, but that's usually after way more than 1 or 2 scotches. We'll never know what was out there that night, and I guess that's a good thing, because even after the booze, it doesn't really matter. I know we'll never go back there. The crazy in the hotel. I'm an assistant manager at a fairly nice hotel in a little tourist town. There was a guy named Michael who was a childhood friend of a housekeeper named Will, back when I was also a housekeeper. He was kind of sketchy, kept following us around every now and then. Occasionally he'd rent a room using Will's employee discount and would stay for extended periods of time. This story is about one of those times. Michael was staying for around a week or so, and I was the person assigned to do his stayover. I went to knock on his door, but before my fist could even connect, I heard this god-awful howling and cursing from the other side of the door. Just a string of fuck yous from here to the end of time, and stuff about how much he hated whoever he was talking to, shit about how it wasn't their job to judge him. It was loud enough that people were filing out of their rooms to see what the ruckus was, and I was just standing there with my hand outstretched, staring wide-eyed at the door. And then there was silence. I called the manager at the front desk and said I was scared to knock on the door because this guy was going batshit. He told me to forget doing anything, but if the guy started yelling again, to call down to the desk and he would take care of it. Fine, okay, I thought. Then Michael started yelling again. I called the manager and he sent up Will from his break to talk to Michael. Will goes in and vanishes for about 45 minutes, and then comes back out and calmly informs me that it's no big deal. Michael was just talking to his mom, and also he needed sheets. This went on for a while. His antics included him drunkenly kicking a garbage bag down the hallway and leaving a trail of soggy corn pops in his wake, outright running from the desk attendant when she asked what his girlfriend's name was, apparently he didn't know who she was, and bringing in these dudes who basically stalked the head housekeeper in hopes of finding out if she was DTF, which she wasn't. We were all then a little more thankful when he left. Except, we had to clean out his room. Or rather, Christy, the housekeeper who had been around the longest, had to clean his room. I watched her walk in, and then I watched her walk out with this bewildered and horrified look on her face. She was always a little dramatic, so I just asked what was going on. "They're everywhere," she said. "What's everywhere?" I asked. "Thongs." Lo and behold, the room was trashed. Blood and shit were smeared across the walls like he was trying to paint a mural with human filth. Garbage bags practically exploded all over the room, the bathtub and sink as black as night. But more baffling were the thongs. And indeed, they were everywhere, strewn about like confetti, unused and freshly cleaned. They were stuffed under the bed, hanging out of drawers, rammed behind the furniture, tied around the pipes. They were heaped in corners. They were laid out in trails. They were crammed in the sink. They were practically coming out of our ears. Just women's thongs. Michael ended up fleeing altogether without paying his bill, so we never had the opportunity to ask him why the fucking hell he had so many thongs, or whose blood was on the wall, or why he decided to make a rainbow of shit in the bathroom. We've not heard from him since. And then his friend just went AWOL. Will stopped showing up to work. I swear, though, Christy seemed to get this look in her eyes whenever anyone mentioned underwear after that, like it was a trigger word. Probably didn't help that, a couple of weeks later, she found another thong tucked away neatly on her cart. This is a scary and sad hotel story. I found it in my research, and I'm leaving it here for a reason. I'll get to that at the end of this short piece. I'm a hotel bartender. I started a few months ago at an upscale place. It was a quiet evening, and a distraught-looking guy came over to the bar and ordered a shot and a beer. I was catching some fucked up vibes from him. To lighten the mood, I tried to drum up some lighthearted conversation, and he tried to, but he couldn't talk. So I asked him if everything was all right. He said no. I asked, "What's wrong? Anything I can help with? Hey, how about some hors d'oeuvres? On the house, buddy." He declined, and then proceeded to tell me that the escort he had hired slit her wrists and is dead in his room's bathtub. I jumped back and was like, holy shit. I didn't know what to do, but I knew that I had to call 911. So, after calling 911 and telling my manager what was up, I ran back to the bar to find the man slumped over and not moving. I went to check on him, and his pulse was weak, and he was pale and cold. Afterwards, the police and medics arrived and cleaned up the mess. A dead hooker and dead depressed businessman. The man's suicide note was found in the room by another guest a few days later. Yeah, a few days. Good job, cops. It said he wanted to feel a woman's touch one more time before overdosing on something that killed him at my bar. It was fucked up. I got a week off of work to deal with it, and was shocked when I came back to find everything normal, like nothing happened, like nobody cared. Uncle Josh, guys. Listen, gang, I don't know if you've had suicide hit close to you, but I have, and in many different instances. Some were due to drugs, some to mental instability, and some were just people that were dealt a bad hand and didn't want this world anymore. They're all tough, but I gotta be honest with you, the last one I mentioned is the roughest of them all. If you know someone who is contemplating suicide, there is something you can do, and share this number with them and see if you can get them help. Sometimes the only thing they need is a voice to guide them. Have them call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 1-800-273-8255. They're open 24/7, and you can get information at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Thanks for listening, gang. I hope you like this volume, and if you want your true scary story read on this channel, send it to me at unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. Check out my Patreon page if you're so inclined to help keeping this channel up and running. Ad-free, awesome, original content only found here. Per some emails and comments I've received, I'll be redoing the platforms on how people can get involved there. Also, I have gotten some pretty funny questions from some of you for a short Q&A show, so keep those coming in the comments and also via email. Until the next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.